Hello, welcome to Gardener's World and welcome back to Longmeadow after a couple of weeks away where everything has changed, not least the radishes which I sowed just 3 weeks ago and are now ready to harvest. You can see very easily the red tops as they appear above the soil and just pick out any that are big enough to pull, and they're delicious when they're this size. And it's a very good way of thinning them, particularly if you broadcast them. What I love about fresh radish from the garden at this time of year is that combination of pepperiness and then the crisp juiciness as you bite into it. Now you might see on your radish leaves little holes. They're caused by flea beetle and they're attracted to brassicas, and radish is a brassica, and you very often see it, for example, on rocket if you sow that at this time of year. But radish grows so quickly that they can't really do any damage. And if you harvest them when they're young, they will be delicious. They'll quickly go to seed. They'll even quickly get woody, but that doesn't matter. This is a catch crop because then the potatoes will grow and shade them out anyway. So the thing to do is to enjoy them now. On today's programme, Nick celebrates the rainbow hues of the bearded iris.
The word rainbow hardly seems to do justice to this amazing array of colours. In fact, I think I'd call it a kaleidoscope.
We follow Sue as she prepares her very first show garden for the RHS Hampton Court Palace Garden Festival.
I love these.
Yes.
These are fantastic. And I think I definitely want these in my wall, if I may.
Yeah.
It'll tie up with my daisy theme so much. What little birdie wouldn't want to make its home in there?
We meet a gardener who has created his jungle paradise in Lincolnshire.
Having a tropical garden really brings a lot of joy to me. I really enjoy growing these kind of massive jungle plants, but the reality is we actually moved here a year ago.
And I shall be starting the process of growing as many vegetables as I possibly can entirely in containers. Now, Nelly, you're going to give me a hand? There's a good girl. Take it. Good girl. Come on, bring it. But first, it's worth just taking stock of the changes that have happened since you were last here, because at this time of year it's happening by the day. The blossom has exploded out. It's been a fabulous year. It's now falling and the paths are covered with their confetti. We've still got really good colour in the borders from the tulips. And then the softness of the blossom, the intensity of the colour is set against that amazing vibrancy of the new green foliage on the hedges and the trees. This time of year just makes my heart sing. Look at you, come on. The forget-me-nots have created this blue haze carpeting the whole of the cottage garden. Now, it looks completely natural, but there is a certain amount of gardening involved because myosotis, forget-me-nots, are biennials. And what that means is that after they flower and set seed, they die. The seeds fall, germinate, and you get a mass of young seedlings. Now, these tend to fall in clumps. So if you just left them, you'd have very intense patches and then some bare ones. So what we do is where the clumps are thickest, we lift the plants, divide them up, and then we plant them out evenly right across the garden. And it's that that creates that uniform carpet of blue. Thank you. There's a good girl. These are cosmos, ready for planting out into the dual garden. That's changed too. The dual garden's always the last bit of Longmeadow to really take off in spring, but it's happening. These rich, intense colours are growing and glowing. in the spring sunshine. There's a lot more to come, but the jewel garden has caught fire. However, we have, just in the last couple of days, come across a problem. And it's to do with the tulips. And although these are going over, they have blotches, which then reduces the petals to a soggy mass. And this pot here looks as though it's been scorched. And what it's got is tulip fire. Now, this is a fungal problem. It only affects tulips. So the first thing I'd say is it's not going to spread to anything else. What I'll do is take all the petals off these, burn them, and then I won't replant these bulbs. And of course, the soil in there is perfectly okay to put on the vegetable garden or to use for anything else, but not to be kept for tulips next year. But the rest of the garden is looking great and very healthy. And I'm going to be adding in some cosmos. These are plants that respond to heat. And that means as soon as the weather warms up, which it is doing now, they really start to grow and of course flower. And in the case of cosmos, go on flowering. These will flower until it gets cool again. And that means that they're fantastically good value for money. They're very easy to grow from seed. So I'm going to pop them in, and I'm looking for areas where they're going to get sunshine. Cosmos do like to have some sun. These are in the Sonata series, purple shades, but you can get cosmos in almost every colour. Now, if you haven't sown seeds, there are two things you can do. You can go to garden centres and you can certainly buy young plants. And I once visited somebody who had a brand new garden, nothing in it at all except for sort of building rubble. They bought a few packets of cosmos seeds, scattered them, they grew quickly and created the most glorious display for weeks and weeks on end. It just looked fantastic. The one thing you do need to remember is that they can't go out until the last risk of frost has passed. They're not frost hardy. However, they will flower, and as long as you keep deadheading, go on flowering well into autumn. Now, Nick has been celebrating irises, and last summer he went to see one of the most glorious of them all, the bearded iris, in its full summer beauty.
Named after the Greek word for rainbow, irises have been adored for their ornamental value for thousands of years. Their gorgeous colours and forms have adorned the crests of medieval castles and the flags of monarchs. And when it comes to the garden, there are few plants which can rival their range and beauty.
The word rainbow hardly seems to do justice to this amazing array of colours. Iris really do feature every single colour in the spectrum, except perhaps the purest of reds. There's so many different tones and hues beautifully mixed together. In fact, I think I'd call it a kaleidoscope.
The genus Iris has around 280 species, and they can be found in truly diverse locations across the Northern Hemisphere, from rivers and bogs to woodland, from meadows to rocky hills and deserts.
There really is an iris for every garden. It's just a matter of choosing the right plant for the right place.
If you're looking for large, glamorous flowers, then you need look no further than bearded iris. They're a group of iris which come in a variety of sizes, from miniature dwarf to tall. But they all have two things in common.
They all have this wonderful beard of hairs, and they all love being baked in sunshine.
While it's their colour that catches the eye first, this is a genus whose form is also unique.
Bearded iris are pretty easy to identify in the garden because they have some very distinct traits. Now, starting right at the bottom of the plant here, they have these heavy rhizomes which are just slightly exposed in the soil, above the soil surface. They're quite thick and chunky. And then slowly making the way up the plant, course, they've got these lovely leaves which are often overlooked. They've got a lovely architectural, almost sort of flame-like quality to them, and then a mint julep or sort of grey-green tone, which is really quite unique in the garden. And then moving further up the stem, you can see these lateral side shoots forming buds, and then once you get to the top, of course, it's the apical flower that opens first. Now, it has, again, very distinct qualities to it. Its petals are arranged in sets of 3. So up the top here are the standards, that are all poking upwards, and then these are the falls around the outside. And at the base of each fall, there is the beard. Now, once you get beyond that, that is where all the good stuff is happening. So in there you have a style, a stigma, pollen, and nectar, and that's going to pull in the insects. So all of these structures, all of this colour and these lines and these forms are arguably about pulling in those pollinators. But I have to say, from a gardener's point of view, they are just the most beautiful flowers.
Colour-wise, along with the myriad combinations, there are even some which display a range of colour from within the same palette.
A little bit like this plant down here, known as Olympic Challenge. Just starting at the edge of the fall here, you've got this sort of peachy, yellowy tone running into white, so this pickety edge. Then once you get up to here, there's this fabulous dense orange beard, which looks absolutely beautiful. Moving up into the falls, you then move into more peachy tones. Looking into the centre, there's bits of mandarin, and as the new buds are starting to emerge, they have burnt orange. So you've got all those beautiful colours within a single palette, and each one makes the other next to it look more radiant.
Although bearded irises usually peak at the end of May to early June, it's possible to enjoy these wonderful blooms for longer. Incorporating a range of dwarf, intermediate and tall bearded iris into your garden with their different blooming times means you can have flowers from the end of April until early summer.
Or there are what are called remontant irises, which means they bloom twice. An example would be this. It's Champagne Elegance. It's looking beautiful in early summer. What's fantastic is that it will re-bloom in the autumn time. So you've got a wonderful display of colour to look forward to right at the back end of the season. Just cleaning up the dead leaves on the base of this Iris Caliente. What amazes me is for all the exoticism and beauty of bearded irises, they're actually relatively simple to grow. You need fairly straightforward conditions. So a free draining soil, full sun, nice and open, so they've got light and air moving through them, and absolutely vitally, they can't deal with any competition. So you must make sure that it's well weeded and there are no other herbaceous plants that are starting to smother it. And then if you can grow the rhizomes so they're just above the surface of the soil and they get very baked, that will ensure you get fantastic flowering. If you get all of those things right, it will perform for you very well.
If you've been growing bearded irises for 3 to 4 years, you may notice that the flowering starts to slow down. The solution is to lift and divide them, which will ensure you get strong flowering once again. And I've found some here which could benefit from this simple process.
So I'm going to ease this plant out of the ground. It's been grown in a nice, light, free-draining soil, so it's coming out very, very easily. There is the plant freed up. And you can see a section has broken away already. Now, looking at the remainder of this plant, you can see that this is the old piece of rhizome. In fact, it's actually started to rot away in the centre. But over here are the bits that are processing forward. And they're the bits we want to preserve. So I'm going to cut away this material at the back. That now means that we've got a good piece of propagation material ready to go. One of the key things with these bearded irises is that the rhizomes always grow in one direction, and that's important when you're coming to replant them. So this is the older side. The newer side is always going to have the freshest growth on it. And so what I'm going to do is arrange them effectively in a circle and allow them to grow back out.
Next, I'm going to cut back the leaves, which will stop the plant going into shock, reduce water loss and prevent wind damage. Then all that's left to do is to replant the iris, making sure to leave the rhizomes at least half exposed. That done, you'll have a fantastic flowering plant next spring. Irises have an otherworldly beauty, and if you have a sunny, well-drained area in your garden, it could be time to welcome in one of the most charismatic of all our flowering plants.
Nick will be looking at some more irises in a few weeks' time. I think particularly water irises and sibirica. And my own bearded irises are just poised to open any moment now. It is one of the highlights of the flowering year. I'm using here some little discs of compressed coir in what looks like a tea bag. They are very good for certain plants that don't like root disturbance. I'm going to be sowing some zinnias, and zinnias do not like to be disturbed, so pricking them out is not a very good idea. And the beauty of these is that the roots come through this biodegradable bag, so get a really compact, fibrous root ball. And then when you plant it out, they grow out through into the soil and they grow away very fast. So I put them into a seed tray like that, just pack them in, and then you need to soak them. You just put them in a tray of water for about 10 minutes, and here is one that I did earlier. The coir absorbs the water, and what you end up with is that sort of shape. And you just plonk the seed into the top there. Now, I've got a range of zinnias, and one of the reasons for growing zinnias is they are so colourful. Now, I'm going to start with perhaps the most famous zinnia of all, which is Zinnia Envy, which is a lime green. It's one of the true green flowers. The seeds are quite large, which means that you can, if you've got deft fingers, handle them individually. Now, with the best will in the world, nobody is going to call my fingers deft, but I do try. Just gently press them down. Now, these will need some heat to germinate. These are a plant that responds to heat very well. So if you haven't got a heated mat or a greenhouse, they will need to go on a warm windowsill. And then when they germinate, give them as much light as you possibly can. Keep them watered. And as soon as you start to see the roots coming out of the bottom and you have a plant that's about 3 or 4 inches big, harden them off by leaving them outside for a week or so in a protected place, and then plant them out. Now it's time to visit the first of your gardens this week, and it takes us to Buckinghamshire and the garden of Michelle Langan.
Hi, my name's Michelle. Welcome to Chestnut Cottage in Buckinghamshire. I've lived here for 5 years with my husband, and I'd like to show you around our garden. I want to show you some of my favourite flowers in the garden, and one of them is this white peony, which was here when we first moved in. But after a couple of years it stopped flowering. So I spoke to one of the specialists at the Chelsea Flower Show, and they advised that in the autumn I dig it all up, split the plant in two, and then plant the 2 separate pieces, which I did. And now, as you can see, there's loads of buds in it and loads of beautiful blooms, and I have a second white peony. My absolute favourite flower in the garden is this coral sunset peony, and I love it because it starts off as a dark magenta pink and fades through different shades of pinks and corals to this cream colour, and I love the ombre effect that's created in the petals. And the flower continues to fade to these delicate pinks all the way down to this cream colour. What I love most about it is it creates this beautiful dramatic display of changing colours within the border. Here are some of the other flowers in my garden. There's this splendid rose. There's a little foxglove hiding in behind there. This is a hibiscus which will flower in August. Some of the lupins, which the bees are absolutely loving at the moment. We were also inspired by Adam off Gardener's World last year and made this small pond in our back garden using an old galvanised tub. And then we decided to make a larger pond in our front garden using an old cattle trough. And it helps encourage wildlife into the garden. That's our little video, and I hope you've enjoyed looking around the garden.
Well, thanks, Michelle. I think your garden looks lovely, and I too love peonies, and mine are just about to open here. Now, this is a tree fern, Dicksonia antarctica, and it's been moved from the damp garden once, and now I want to move it again, because I've got another one over on the other side, and it's thriving and very happy. But this one is slightly hidden. Within a month's time, there'll be too much growth in front of it, and I won't really be able to see it. But I'm going to move this one over the other side, and the beauty of them is they're very easy to move, because essentially all their roots are on the outside of the trunk, and hardly any roots anchoring them to the ground. So I should be able to just dig this out and lift it without too much trouble. Now, it's just starting into growth, so this is a perfectly good time to do it. There we go. Up you come. I've already made a hole where I want it to go, which is there. Tree ferns, by the way, do need to be in semi-shade, and it has to be stressed that you should only ever buy or plant or grow a tree fern that has got the appropriate license, and that will be nailed to the trunk. When you transplant anything, it is important to try and recreate all the same conditions, and not least to plant it at the same level, just exactly at that point, and that's going to dictate how deep my hole is. That's perfect. You do need to bury it so it doesn't rock or move. It's got to be really securely in the ground. So, first thing to do is to undo the protection. And the really fragile, sensitive part of any tree fern is the top of the trunk, where the foliage sprouts from. So hopefully that is still alive in there. It's been a very mild winter really here at Longmeadow. Nevertheless, let's take these out. What I am going to do is take out all last year's fronds, because they will be entirely replaced with new ones. So that can come out there, cut right back at the base. These are the fronds waiting to emerge from their closed furry glove, and they will unfurl out very quickly and get big. They'll be right out here, and that's the beauty of the tree fern. So that's in good nick, very healthy. This will be, but it will need watering, as will that, and they need watering constantly. It's much easier to use a hose pipe when you're dealing with tree ferns. Now I'm going to water in where I've planted it a little, just to make sure that the soil settles around it. But much more important is to keep the trunk and the top where the fronds grow from as moist as you can, and they love wet air. So if we change that to a spray, I will spray the trunk, and ideally that never truly dries out. That's what they like. When the fronds are grown, also what they love is just a fine mist, and if it hasn't rained for about 3 or 4 days, make sure that the air around them is damp and that the trunk has a good soak. Now, we do have all kinds of exotic plants in this garden. We have bananas, we have tree ferns, we have cannas, all kinds of things. But it's not a jungle. However, George Lowther, in his garden in North Lincolnshire, set out to transform a long, bare garden into precisely that, a true jungle. And he did so brilliantly. So last September, we went to visit him.
Having a tropical garden really brings a lot of joy to me. I really enjoy growing these kind of massive jungle plants. It is like a secluded area that feels away from, outside life. It's his own little bit of paradise. The garden might look quite established already, but the reality is we actually moved here a year ago. It's a narrow garden, so it's 7.5 metres wide, but then it's about 75 metres long. When we moved in, it was a blank canvas. It's been a bit of a journey since then, piecing things together, slowly planting, using every weekend, every evening that I can to help build this garden. A lot of the bigger plants I bought around 4 or 5 years ago, and those are the plants that bring a lot of the established feel here now. We had to move everything from our old house. Some of the bamboos were in a pot that was over 1 metre wide, and trying to get that into the back of a Luton van, poking out the edge, it wasn't ideal. Seeing them actually in the final place now, growing away happily and really settling in, it makes the effort definitely feel worthwhile. The one group of plants that really makes a tropical garden are the plants with the really big leaves. Plants like Gunra manicata, the hostas banana plants, tetrapanax. It's those really big leaves that for me just embodies the exotic. So this year in the garden, I've tried to do a lot of experimental combinations. So the tree ferns, they're out all year round, but mixed in with those, I've got annuals like the ricinus, which got these massive leaves, and they're a great infill plant. To bring some colour, I've got plants like the coleus. They're a bedding plant with so many bright colours, and they're a really helpful plant for those dark, shady spots, but they definitely fit in with a tropical theme. So the salvia amistad, I grew from a very small plant early in the year. And I actually bought a pack of plugs back in March or April, and in just a few months, they've ballooned up. They're absolutely huge now, and they're covered in these purple flowers. And the bees love them as well. I've got the Enseti banana. It's got these amazing red, orange, powder-like leaves. They look absolutely fantastic as the light shining through them. It really brings out all those oranges. It's a plant that is so easy to grow. By the end of its first season, it can be 5 or 6 foot tall. They do need overwintering inside or somewhere a bit warmer. When it comes to summer, they just grow so fast, it's definitely worth it. You get a lot of plant for your money, statement plant for a tenner, which is absolutely fantastic. One of the oldest and most amazing plants in the garden is this beautiful tree fern. It looks fantastic here under the shade of next door's trees, and what I've done is intentionally planted it at an angle so it feels like the garden's wrapping around you as you walk in. It's a fantastic plant, but even more experimental than this are the colourful plants I got below it. A lot of these beautiful green plants are a great backdrop to the bright colours in front. I've used a variety of different plants. Nasturtiums are a really common garden plant, they're easy to grow and they're very cheap to buy as seeds. When I've got areas of bare soil in May, I direct sow them straight into the ground and let them do the thing. They really soften the edges of the garden. You get these great leaves, and then you also get beautiful yellow flowers, which go absolutely perfectly with the other bright exotics. Some of these, like the alocasia here, the bromeliad, and even the spider plant here, they're all houseplants that basically come outside for a summer holiday. And this zingy red bromeliad, a cheap supermarket purchase, rather than keeping it inside all year, I bring it out for the summer where it really adds to these other bright colours. I don't tend to have a lot of pastel colours. I find that if you focus on the bright reds, the yellows, the oranges, the purples of the salvia, it's that really makes me feel like I'm somewhere different. You don't need massive plants in a huge garden to create this sort of effect. I've tried to create the similar sort of look at the front of the garden in a smaller border. And how I've done that is use the same colours, use the greens as the main sort of backdrop, and then add some interest with bright colours, splash the purples in again. I've chosen the palm in the middle. It's only a small size, but they're very fast growing. Around it, I've got Fatsia japonica, which again grow really quickly, so you can buy them in a small size, and within a few years, you've got that specimen plant you want in. Persicaria Purple Fantasy, it's a really easy plant to grow. I think it grows better in a brighter spot, somewhere with a bit of sun, and you really get to see those dark chevron patterns in the leaves. But it grows equally well in shade. When winter comes, the frosts tend to blacken it, flatten it a bit, but it starts growing really quickly in February, March time. It's a really, really tough plant. The heucheras, the ferns, the persicaria, they're all plants that you can buy at pretty much any garden centre. They don't cost a lot of money, but if you put them in the ground, within a few months, they've all meshed together like this, and it really creates that lush tropical effect. You don't need to have a huge amount of horticultural knowledge. It's very accessible, and it's about experimenting. Not every plant has to be hard to look after, very sort of tender, or you might struggle to get it through winter. When it comes to August, September time, and you see the plants that started off really small early in the year, they're now full plants, 5-6 foot tall. Having something that grows that quickly, it really brings a whole sort of new dimension to gardening in my eyes. So it's definitely the start of the journey here in the garden, but I think the thing that I'm most proud of is how well it's grown already in this first year. I'm starting to get glimpses of the garden that it will be, and it already feels like an actual place rather than just a collection of plants.
George's last remark really resonates because it's so important that a garden is a place rather than just a collection of plants. It doesn't matter what the plants are until it takes on an identity of its own that has meaning for you as a gardener. It never really comes alive. Now I've got some small chilies here. This is de Cayenne, which is one of my favourites. So these have been grown and pricked out into relatively small pots. And if I take that out of the pot, like that, you can see that it's got a good root system. It's not pot bound, but it's ready to pot on. Now, this is the final pot that it's going into. Quite small, but too big for the plant to go in there. There's no virtue in over-potting anything because the extra compost can act as a sump for water and it can be too wet. So I'm going to pot these on into the next size up, which may not look like much of a difference, but it's just enough to let those roots grow out for another 2, 3, or even 4 weeks. Then we get a stronger plant to put in here. So it's a question of gradual progression, keeping it healthy and strong. Now, the best way to do this is just put a bit in the bottom like that, and then put the whole thing, plastic pot and all, into the other pot, and just heap your compost over it so it goes down the side, and then just lift the pot out, and what you'll have is a space in which you just pop that in, and that's ready. Put that somewhere warm, a porch, windowsill, greenhouse. Keep it well watered. If you feed it at this stage, a nitrogen feed to encourage good leaf growth, but this has bought me about 3 weeks' time. Now, still to come on today's programme. We join Sue in Pembrokeshire as she prepares for her first show garden at the RHS Hampton Court Palace Garden Festival.
Every time I put my brush into my paint, I get really excited to see how these natural colours react with the natural wood.
But first, we visit the garden of the Apata family in Coventry.
Hi Gardeners World, my name is Saniska. This is our back garden and we started gardening this year. These are our dahlias. We've grown them from seed with Monty, and they flowered these beautiful yellow, purple, and white flowers. This rose in April, and then soon after it had got black spots, we took out the leaves and then gave it a good mulch. And then it's recovered and given these beautiful flowers. This is our tomato patch, and as you can see, it's giving these beautiful tomatoes at the back, and these wonderful flowers which flowered in spring, And yeah, we've been picking the tomatoes and eating them for dinner. Daddy planted these peppers, and as you can see, we've got a huge pepper over here. Corner of our lawn for some wildflowers, and as you can see, it's given us some lovely poppies, and these lovely tiny flowers. And then I love these long grasses.
Thank you, Gardener's World.
Well, thank you very much, Taniska. And clearly, you're a natural gardener. It already looks fantastic. Let's pop that down. Now, this is a new small project. And the goal of it is to grow as many vegetables as I possibly can in as wide a range of containers as I can fit onto this space. What I really want to show is that you don't need an allotment or a veg plot, you don't even need a garden in order to grow some really good, tasty, seasonal food. And almost anything that will hold soil and release water will do. This is a pot that, believe it or not, I've had for 20 years. I've used it for all kinds of things, but it makes a brilliant container for growing potatoes. Now, it's late in the season for getting seed potatoes, but if you can get some, sow them now, and there's no reason why you shouldn't have a harvest in late summer. Now, potatoes like lots of nutrition and lots of water. So I'm going to put a layer of garden compost in, which will both soak up water and provide goodness. So 3 shovelfuls of that in there. And then I've got some peat-free compost, which I will be using for most of the vegetables. So just mix that up a little bit. Now, a pot this size, I will put 3 seed potatoes in, certainly no more. And I've grown potatoes in bin bags, and dustbin, any container, but the bigger the container, the better the crop you'll have. Right, we'll just cover these over. At this stage, I don't need a great depth of soil above the seed potatoes, because what I shall do is, as they grow, I'll earth them up by adding more compost to them, and we'll get a bigger crop. Right, those are the spuds. Now, this may look useless, but actually I've used it before, and what I want to use it for is lettuce. But it will need crocks, because otherwise the compost will fall out. Now, if you're going to grow lettuce in a container, I think it makes sense to grow a loose leaf variety, or sometimes called cut and come again. And the beauty of them is they will regrow. You can usually get at least 2 and very often 3 separate cuttings from one sowing. Good contact. And then lightly cover them until I can't see the seeds anymore. I've sown seed, I've sown a tuber. I'm now going to put some plugs in. And you can buy vegetable plugs from garden centres. What I've got are some cabbage. It's a summer cabbage called Primo and should be ready for eating round about the end of July, August. And I'm going to use this container because I need a bit of space for cabbage, and I'm going to top it up with a bit of compost. It may seem that you need an awful lot of bags of compost, but it's an investment because you can probably get 2 crops from each bag of compost, especially if you top it up with some fresh garden compost or soil improver. And I think I could get 6 in here. Pop them in like that. Now these are closer together than you would normally plant cabbages, but they'll be just as delicious. I will water these as I will the potatoes and the lettuce, and I'll make sure they're kept watered. And my goal is to cover this space with pots of every kind and vegetables of every kind. And plants that I grow outside in the vegetable garden, I'll grow some in the containers too, so we can compare like for like. But the main purpose is hopefully to show, however little space you've got, everybody can grow some delicious, organic, seasonal food, and also save some money in the process. Now we're off to Pembrokeshire to join Sue, as she is preparing for her very first show garden at Hampton Court.
Since accepting the challenge of building a garden for the Hampton Court Palace Garden Festival, it's been a whirlwind. I've chosen the paving for my landscaping, visited the plot at Hampton Court, and even had time to try a little experiment in my back garden.
This bench was delivered and it's a key part of the garden. I wanted to make sure that I got enough room to walk around it to be able to tend the plants. We've mocked up some trees out of old lampshades and things to get the height perspective, and I've set the plants in the beds. But what it's taught me is my water feature is too big. So have a sausage, have a sausage. I've one too many rows of daisies, so I'm going to lose a row of daisies. So it's all been a really useful experiment in perspective.
Building this garden has been very much a juggling act. Having played with the design a little bit, I'm also moving forward with the construction element of my garden. I'm getting lots of help from Pembrokeshire Council, who run a social enterprise employing disabled people. My design involves building 2 walls, which will sit at right angles to each other. I'm really hoping it will work just as well as it did on paper. I am nervous. This is going to be judged, so I really have to get this right. Di is heading up the construction of my first wall. Hello, Di, how are you?
How are you, Sue? Nice to see you again.
How's it going?
Well, I'd say it's been a challenge, but it's been good. The team are doing very well.
It looks fantastic, just as I imagined, but it's almost better. My feature wall is inspired by my kitchen shelves, which are just 20 centimetres deep, the length of my arms, so I can reach in. I'll incorporate pots, hanging tools and insect-friendly nooks and crannies into the wall. Would it be possible for you to make a little piece of wood with holes in for bees here?
Yeah, I'll get some of our guys to make up a little bug hotel or something like that.
The other thing I got on my plan, now I'm putting you through it, is books. Part of the joy of being in a garden is reading, and I wanted to be able to put them in a sort of waterproof environment. What options have I got with doors?
We could do various styles, actually. We can do a double door, which opens up both sides. Easier access might be just a drawer door, so we can pull the drawers back. You could have a fold-down door, whichever suits you, really.
A fold-down door would be difficult because once it folds, I then can't reach the books because my arms are only 8 inches long.
That's true.
I think maybe just an opening door might be a great plan. Is that doable?
Yeah.
We're going to include bird boxes and bee hotels. Could we put a little hedgehog house in the bottom corner? I know I haven't mentioned it before.
Yeah, no, it's fine. We should do something.
You
could just
could?
do something. Yeah, we make a lot of sort of habitats or things.
Thank you. One more thing. They're building the second wall at Scolter Manor, where my garden will eventually find a home. It's really coming alive now. I can't quite believe it. Made from larch offcuts, this one is entirely different. The rough side will face outwards, but it's my experiment on the smooth side that I'm really excited about. I've got my wood cut and I wanted to bring a bit of colour and interest into the wooden fence, and I thought I would juice some vegetables and see if I could make plant dyes. So I made all these juices the other day in the kitchen, but I'm not, you know, #1 favourite with my husband because there was rather a lot of mess which I left him to clean up with. So I'm in the doghouse at the moment. The beetroot is going on beautifully, and I'll need 3 coats of this. It looks absolutely lovely. This will fade. I don't know how long it's going to last, but the lovely thing about the fact that it fades is the ever-changing garden is a bit of a delight, really. I've enlisted some help, and Mark and Joe are putting on the turmeric and the wild garlic stain. How are you getting on?
Very good, very good.
The colour's looking great.
I'm surprised on how well they've come out.
Joe, what colour do you prefer?
That one, I think, because it shows out more.
I don't know what all the colours are going to look like together, and I am worried that the judges might not like it, but it's something that I want to do, and I enjoy the creativity of it, so I'm going to give it a risk. Every time I put my brush into my paint, I get really excited to see how these natural colours react with the natural wood. I like the fact that I'm doing no harm to me and I'm doing no harm to the wildlife. My feet have taken a bit of a hammering testing all this sort of thing out, so I am going to have a big bath and off to the pedicurist to sort my toes and my feet out. I've nearly finished mine. How are you going?
I've just finished my one.
And I'm not far off.
I think we should put them all together and see what they look like. My wild wall of plant juices. With the eyes of the judges on my garden, I also need to show finesse. Daisies are central to my design. I'll have erigeron arrayed in rows across the ground. Brachyscum and erigeron, I haven't quite decided which yet, are in pots on the wall. To riff on the daisy scheme, I've asked artist Hannah and Gethin to complement this with glass panels and bird boxes to be set into the wall. I really wanted art in the wall, and I haven't got the skills that you've got, and the daisies are stunningly beautiful. How long does it take you to do my drawing?
It normally takes days, and it depends how many hours I'm in here.
It looks so amazingly complicated, and I like the way you put all the different colours into one of them, and then we've just got the greens and the whites and the yellows. Do you ever use a paintbrush?
Well, I do use a paintbrush when it comes to applying the paints.
But this is the outline?
Yeah.
This one is so joyously cheerful. It's got my favourite colour pink in, and it is beautiful. And you've done such fine work on this. It's exceptional, Hannah. I'm so glad that you're part of this. Lovely to see you working so hard on the bird boxes.
And the bird boxes, and those bird boxes already varnished.
I love these.
Yes.
These are fantastic.
Thanks.
And I think I definitely want these in my wall, if I may.
Yeah.
I love the colouring of this, and it'll tie up with my daisy theme so much. What little birdie wouldn't want to make its home in there? You're burning it in, aren't you? You're
Yeah.
burning in the outline, and then
I
you're
do.
painting it on. It's such fine work.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for doing these for me.
Thanks. Great to see you again.
Okay, lovely to see you. Bye, Gethin.
Goodbye, and thanks very much.
Okay.
Have a nice day.
You too.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
I'm so happy with the work so far, but there's still a lot to do, and I'm looking forward to seeing how both walls will continue to come together in the weeks ahead.
I love those vegetable dyes, and it'll be very interesting to see how they fade. And we'll get the chance to do that because we're going to join Sue one more time before her final showtime at Hampton Court. You may remember that a month ago I sowed some loofahs. And I asked from many of you as possible to sow some too, so we'd be completely loofah-tastic and have a loofah pond. Well, I've never grown loofahs before, but at this stage, they're growing quite well. And I haven't looked at the roots yet. Not a bad root system. Now, that is at the perfect stage for potting on. So what I'll do is pot that into the next size up pot, grow it on for about another 2-3 weeks until the weather warms up round about the middle of June, because heat is the key to loofahs. And then we can see if they bear the fruits, which of course the insides of make our loofahs. So at this stage, that's ready for potting on, and then they will grow ready for planting out in a little while. Now, we're going to visit the next of your gardens this week, and we're going to Scotland to visit the garden of Fiona Wilson.
Hello, hi, I'm Fiona, and welcome to our garden here in Edinburgh. Our garden's on a corner plot, south facing, super sunny and brilliant for flowers. We've been here around 7 years, and every year we learn something new. I'd love to show you what we've managed to achieve at the side of the house. We've given ourselves a lovely shady and private spot to enjoy. 2 months ago, this area was my potting up area full of old compost bags, gravel, old pots, and it really was not a pleasant place to be. And on a fair day, you might even find my washing hanging out to dry. I discovered there was a really good trough of earth up against the wall. I dug that out and replenished it with fresh compost. When I came to plant up this area, I had a look around the garden and thought, what can I use? And I came across lots of self-seeded foxgloves. I potted them up, grew them on, and I've been able to use them in this area to create a nice tranquil spot. So these are my self-seeded foxgloves, and I'm sure you'll agree they've just come out so magnificently. You'll see they don't just have a single stem, they've got multiple stems, which I'm really chuffed about, and the bees just love them, as you can see here. I hope you enjoyed seeing our courtyard garden. We love it, and we hope that you do too.
Well, thanks very much, Fiona. And I have to say, I do love a foxglove. You can't go wrong with it. They're always beautiful. Now, the damp garden over the last few weeks has really come on. The hostas are growing large, and the whole thing does feel as though it is moving towards some kind of maturity. But the plant that really is at its peak right now is the viburnum. That's Viburnum plicatum marisii, with its layers of blossom, which lasts a good 10 days, 2 weeks. And then, of course, it has the added attraction of some of the best autumn colour of any plant that you can grow. It might seem a little late to be moving or dividing plants, but there is one type of plant for which this is absolutely the perfect moment, and those are grasses. This is a miscanthus, Miscanthus sachariflorus. It actually goes right round here, which is one of the very biggest of all the grasses that you can grow, at least 10 foot. So by August, it's really statuesque. And what I want to do is take a chunk from it and then replant it over in the other bed, so we get a bit of balance into the way it appears. Now, what I would expect is really quite a big, solid root. It's going to take quite a lot of digging out. Can you hear how solid that is? It's almost like digging through a tree stump. Now, one thing is for certain, I'm not going to be able to lift that out the ground, so I'm going to have to chop it up into pieces. And if you are moving these big plants, just be prepared. It's not something to do lightly. It's quite hard work. Right, there's one bit. Right, I'm going to transplant these to their new home, which hopefully will be a bit easier than taking them out. There we go. Oh, blimey. I've got a space in the middle of the border here. Right, I think that's deep enough. I'm not going to check. This is as heavy as a bag of cement. I don't know how much a bag of cement weighs, but it's a lump. As ever, the important thing is to put it back as near as possible at the same level that it was. Okay, let's see if we can get another lump in too. Okay. Ooh. Sometimes when you move grasses, they can take a year or so to get going again. It just needs to get its roots out into the soil. Right, I've got 2 more sections to plant. But while I'm doing that, here are some jobs for you this weekend. Now is a good time to take softwood cuttings from herbs like rosemary. Look for non-flowering new shoots and take off the tips about an inch or no more than 2 long and immediately put them into a polythene bag. And then strip off most of the lower foliage, make a clean cut beneath a node and insert the cuttings into a very free-draining compost. Water the pot well and then cover it with a polythene bag, sealing it to keep in the moisture. And they should strike very quickly. Every garden should try and make its own compost. Gather up all your waste material from the kitchen and the garden and try and have a good mix of green and brown matter. Then turn it, and this will give it oxygen. When your container is full, turn it again. And if it's a bit dry, don't hesitate to water it. When finally you've turned it 2 or 3 times and you've given it a few months for the bacteria to work, you should have clean-smelling, rich compost that will work wonders for your garden. Here's a job not just for this weekend, but for every weekend for the coming few weeks. And that is to support your growing plants. And the secret is to do it before they need rescuing. It doesn't matter what supports you use, but gently bolster the plant so as it grows, it is secure and holds its shape. This is unquestionably my favourite time of year. And I think my favourite flower of all is the cow parsley. It's a weed, of course, but nothing could be more welcome than this lovely, soft waft of white flowers above the vibrant green foliage with these dots of colour from the geraniums and the lovely delicacy of the Rosa cantabrigiensis, one of the first to flower always, with these small primrose yellow flowers. The whole thing just sings. And it's an important time of year for gardeners too, because next week is Chelsea Flower Show. And I'll be there every day along with the rest of the team, and then we'll be back here at Longmeadow the following week. So, see you next week at Chelsea and back here in a fortnight's time. Till then, bye-bye.